Welcome back to the channel. This is part 3 of the T4 rebuild on the underside. In the last update, we got all this suspension stuff bolted up and we got the front brakes on as well. And I mentioned a few things that still needed to be bolted up. So lots of those parts have now arrived, so I'll quickly go through them. So to start with, we've got new discs for the rear, just the 280 ones. Those came with pads as well, and I've noticed one of the pads has a sensor on it. We'll just rip that off because we don't need that. And obviously we've got the brake lines, the flexis that I went over, the drive shafts, all the clips and bits, carriers, sliders, fuel tank straps. That's the other brake disc in there. And then this is the other bits that I was waiting for, is all the handbrake stuff. So because this van had been sitting quite a while, I'm having to replace pretty much everything on the handbrake assembly other than the lever itself, and obviously I've got the rear calipers, but absolutely everything in between I've had to buy. So these are the two cables that split off and go to the rear calipers, and this is the main cable that comes off of the handbrake lever itself. Now I believe this cable and these cables only come in one size. They come in a couple different variations, whether you're running drums or discs at the back. But these particular cables and this one, I believe, just come in one size. The only difference for short wheelbase and long wheelbase is the length of these pull rods. So these are obviously short wheelbase ones to match my van. And then obviously we've got all the little clips and springs and whatnot. And these two holes here are what these pull rods hook into. But I'll show you all this stuff once I've got it sussed out and fitted to the van. Right, so the first thing I'm going to replace is the discs and pads at the back, and that means I can get the rear calipers on as well. So we're going to whip off these old discs, get these shiny new ones on, and then we'll get the calipers and stuff on as well, and then we can start to think about the flexis and the rest of the brake system. Okay, that's the new brakes fitted to the driver's side rear now. That's the brakes now fitted to the passenger side at the rear as well. The only issue I had at this side was one of the sliders was actually bad. So this is the slider that I failed to notice was not the best. You can see that lip bit where the little boot is supposed to sort of grip onto is not great. And I did try to sort of bend it back into shape, but like you can see on this bit, it just snapped off. But the good thing is that I have a spare set of old Audi TT calipers. So I pinched a slider off of them and it appears to be the exact same, so that was lucky. Right, next thing I'm going to do is fit all of these flexi lines. So there's one big one at the front either side, and then on the rear there's basically two different smaller ones. I believe this one here with the male end goes straight into the caliper, and then you've got a hard line, and then you've got these ones that join to the line that goes to the brake compensator valve. Right, so that's the driver's side front flexi on now. I've got the little spring retainer clip in there as well. Just need to spread these rubber bung bits out just to stop it rubbing on the chassis. And then I've made up a little hard line that goes at the front here, and that's got the spring retainer clip as well. Okay, now the fronts are done, can move on to the rear. So obviously I've ran the 2 feed lines into this valve already. So I need to remove these old outlet feeds, and where they go to, this one here, is a hard line that goes to this little bracket up here. And then we've got this flexi here, which joins essentially from there to there. So that's the flexi for the movement in this arm as it sort of travels up and down. There's then another hard line that comes from there, and I believe it comes over the arm and it runs down this sort of lip bit here into this bracket, and then we have a flexi from here into the caliper, and that is the flexi that has the male end there. So the male end will go straight into the caliper, and this end will be on this bracket. Right, so these little tabs that come off of the arms here, well, the first point is they're super weak. So I don't think it would take much for these to actually snap off. And also I'm struggling to remove the old brake line that was super stuck in there. And any effort I do put into removing this, it just wants to bend these. So to be honest, I've just made up some pretty simple sort of 90-degree brackets, and I've cleaned up the arm a bit more as well. And I'm just gonna tack them on really quick with the flexi on, just to ensure that the flexi's under no real stress and it's got a little bit of freedom to move there. And then I'll whip the flexi back off and I'll get these fully welded on. It's the exact same at this side. So I'll get those welded on just now. Okay, that's the rear brake lines now done. So I've ran new hard pipes, so they come out of that flexi, which is just this one here that comes from the load sensing valve. So they come out of there. I've ran them down the lower section of this arm. I've put a bit of hose on here just to absorb any rattles. And then that goes into the little brackets that just welded on, and then into the flexi. And the flexi has plenty of movement now. So yep, it's the same on the driver's side. So flexi's got a nice bit of movement there. Pops into this little bracket that I welded on. We've then got the hard line. Comes around here, a bit of hose just to absorb any rattles or bashing against the arm. Up and over, and then into that other flexi just there. So what that means is the brake lines are now complete on the entire van. So I can now fill the master cylinder up with fluid. I'm not going to do that just yet, but I can now do this when I get around to it. But I can fill the master cylinder up with fluid, and I can actually bleed the brakes when I'm ready. So next up to be fitted is the handbrake and all the cables and the little mechanism parts. Now I've never actually changed the handbrake cable or anything on a T4 before. The handbrake that was on the van was pretty knackered and fairly non-existent, so I'm sort of winging this, where all the bits go. I do have a diagram that I'm following that I'll chuck up just now on screen. But I think it's fairly simple. You've essentially got the handbrake lever itself at this bottom bit. You run the main central cable, so that hooks onto that point. That cable then has a threaded bar, which I believe goes through this little bracket, and it catches onto this little spring that hooks on to this little clip that hooks onto the chassis. And then from this bar and these two holes, you've got these rods, and those rods sort of split the cable off into two. You've then got these two cables, and these are the ones that actually hook into the rear calipers. And yeah, that's essentially it. Right, I think that's the entire handbrake assembly on now. I'll just run through the various bits that I've put on. So I've not fitted this grommet yet, but obviously the first thing I done was bolted in the handbrake itself. I hooked up this cable through the little pin and put the little retaining clip in. You've then got this white plastic thing that sits in this part on the chassis. There's one at this side as well, which I'm assuming is for European left-hand drive vans. Anyway, the cable then comes in, and then this plastic little clip thing is what centralizes the cable. So I think this is right, that the cable then comes through the middle here. It then comes to this assembly. So as I mentioned, this cable has this studded bar. You then have this little bracket, I guess, that slips over the threaded bar. You've then got this nut here, and this is the main adjustment nut. So I'm assuming I'm gonna have to adjust this a little bit more probably, but as sort of the pads wear down on the rear, it's likely that this will get adjusted. So I think it's probably a good idea that I grease up this stud and this nut as well. You've then got this plastic bit that threads onto the end, and that is basically to hold this retaining spring, which then sits on this little clip, which just slots into the central hole on the cross member that comes before the proportioning valve. Then from this bracket, you've got these pull rods that hook onto this bracket. I think I originally had these on the wrong way, so they came in from the bottom up to the top. I had a quick look at that diagram and it seems like they go in from the top and come in underneath, so I swapped them round. They then go out to here. Now this is one bit I'm not sure of. I know the handbrake cable goes through this bracket on the chassis here. I'm just not sure which bit sits where. So I'm assuming the bit I've got there's like a plastic circular bit. I'm assuming that is designed to sit there so that it rests there and this cable cannot pull through this bracket. So I'll have it like that for now and see how it goes. It then routes over the arm here. And then there's these little brackets that come off the arm. So I've just popped it into the lower one on there. I'm assuming that the top one and also this one is for any wiring, maybe ABS sensors or brake pad wear or something like that. I don't have any of this on this van. These arms came from a later van, so I'm assuming it did. So I'm just going to leave these as they are. So anyway, yep, the handbrake cable slots into there. I then run it under the rear arm here, where it then enters the mechanism on the back of the caliper, and then the ball at the end locks it onto here. So obviously as I pull the handbrake, it's going to pull on here, and then it's going to engage the pads onto the disc. Now if you've been watching previous videos, you'll know that there's been quite a decent bit of welding that's went on in here. You can see all this sort of corner, a little bit just in here, the gearbox, the gear stick mounting plate. There's another bit up the top there. So this whole sort of flooring section on the cab, I'm going to give this a good clean up and probably just give it a single coat of the underseal stuff that I put on the underside of the van. So what that means is this handbrake will likely come off again, but all I'll have to do is just pop this little pin out and push the cable out and unbolt the lever itself. And that's also why I've not fitted this grommet just yet, because this bit will likely get painted. But yeah, just as a quick test with absolutely nothing adjusted yet, the handbrake actually feels pretty good. Feels like it's engaging quite nicely. I don't know, I'm just turning this by hand, but I can't turn that, so it must be doing something. So yeah, I'm just going to leave this as it is for now, and we'll come back and adjust or do what we need to do once floor's painted and the van is hopefully running and driving again, and we're doing the sort of MOT checks and things like that. Okay, so other than popping the drive shafts on and popping some wheels on, the last thing to go on now before we can get the van down is the tank. Now this is the tank here. This is the original standard tank that was on the van. I believe these are 80-litre tanks. Now obviously the van was stood resting for around 10, 11 years-ish. So a lot of the diesel in this tank, there's about half a tank, maybe just over half a tank in here. A lot of this diesel has sat for quite a while. There is about 10, 15 litres of good fresh diesel in here. So what I've done is, just to verify it's all good or it looks good enough to be used, I've whipped off the sender unit and I've just used like a little bilge pump to just suck a wee bit of the fuel out. And it doesn't look too bad to me. It looks good enough to not have to sort of drain it all out anyway. I think the old AAB should chew this up pretty good. But I think what I'll do anyway is I will chuck some more good diesel into it as well, and I'll probably throw in some like diesel cleaner additive type stuff. And I'm sure the old 2.4 diesel should drink it up just fine. But yeah, before I get this tank up, I'm going to see if I can just give it a quick wipe down. I'll stick the sender unit back on just to seal it up, and I'll likely give it a pressure wash just to get some of this crap off it. But other than that, I think it's good to be refitted onto the van. Okay, that's the drive shafts on at the front now as well. And then I've just sort of cable tied them up to the control arm there, just to stop them battering about when the van's sort of getting pushed around. But yeah, it's important to pop these drive shafts in, especially if I'm going to be putting the van back down and rolling it around, because the bearings in the front really don't react well to being pushed around on the weight of the van when there's sort of nothing in there to support them. All right, got all the wheels looked out. Now it's time to throw them on the van. Alright, as you can see, T4 is now back where it was when I was doing all the welding work. So it's now off the lift, it's rolling again, and it's ready for its engine. So the engine is just sitting right here, and this is going to be the next part of the project. Sort of taking this to bits. Not internals or anything like that, but just new gaskets, clutch, bit of paint on the rocker cover, things like that. Clean out the sump, maybe change the oil pickup pipe if it's clogged. I know it needs at least one glow plug, so I'll probably do all the glow plugs. The pump needs a seal kit. And yeah, various things. Like I'll probably throw a timing belt on it. Maybe the belt for the pump as well. Obviously full service, change all the oil, change the oil in the box as well. But anyway, I'm going to save all this for another video. I'm going to end this video here. Please like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.